When I started Reltio in 2011, the core thesis that informed the foundation was the fact that companies, enterprises in particular, will continue to see an explosion in applications and therefore data silos. I have never heard a business owner say they want to move slower. Everybody wants to move faster. Every business process, if they were able to do something in 30 days, they want to now do it in 7 days. And that's the natural progression that we will continue to see, where every business process needs to execute in a shorter time frame, faster, without human intervention. And this is where agentic comes in. The tools today measure the quality of data, but they don't fix it. The remediation of that data has to happen in parallel. And that remediation can be done by agentic capabilities.
Welcome to the new automation mindset, where AI, automation, and integration come together. I'm your host, Marcus Zern, and as Chief Strategy Officer and part of the founding executive team at Workato, it is my mission to find these top innovators in AI, automation, and integration and share their journeys with all of you. So today, it's my pleasure to welcome Manish Sood. Manish is the CEO of Reltio. And Reltio and Workato were partners in the marketplace. And, I think we've got a very similar DNA. So let me explain quickly. So Reltio is the cloud-native data unification and management platform. So it's modern MDM, modern master data management. And also, Manish, you have a long history in MDM, right? So previously Cyperion, which got acquired by Informatica and so on. And so if you look at Workato, it's kind of mirroring this in a way. So Workato is the cloud-native iPaaS and orchestration platform. It's modern integration and process workflow. And then Vijay Tella, our CEO, he's done this his whole life, like starting in the late 80s with TIBCO. Has built his entire career in integration. So very similar kind of evolution and traits. And then you guys at Reltio, you also embed Workato as your integration platform. So it creates a complete platform offering, really. So what I thought today we do is we'll dig a little bit into like modern enterprise architecture with MDM and iPaaS, and also why this matters, in my opinion, even more than ever before in the new world of Gen AI. So Manish, let's kick this off a little bit. I'm curious, like when you started Reltio, if you go back. When it all began, what was your founding vision? I mean, you've done, as we said, MDM before. Why did you start Reltio? And then, what is it that Reltio, in your opinion, is doing differently from the old school MDM platforms?
Marcus, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. Great question. I would start with this is the benefit of hindsight. Having been through the experience, having looked at the previous generation of technologies and capabilities, when I started Reltio in 2011, the core thesis that informed the foundation was the fact that companies, enterprises in particular, will continue to see an explosion in applications and therefore data silos. Because every application, the way it was designed, up to now, was every application should have its own data, its own data set or database to work with. And, going back to my career, early 2000s, if companies had 6 different applications, they thought their life was very complicated. By 2013, 2014 type of a time frame, all of these same enterprises were looking at 600 different applications in their landscape. And I think as we move forward, this number is going to further explode because creating new applications is going to become even easier than ever before. especially with AI type of capabilities. And you'll see the explosion going from 600 to 6,000 different applications. So that was sort of the first insight that informed the founding of Reltio. The second one was every CIO that I had met, worked with, talked to in the past was trying to figure out how to keep their legacy infrastructure delivering more value. Because, when you think about legacy, it's not an automatic assumption that everything in the legacy category is going to suddenly overnight disappear out of a CIO's landscape. They have to, mainframes are still around. They still have to work with those types of capabilities, but they need better ways of getting more value out of those legacy investments while in parallel they try to modernize their landscape. And when you think about that modernization, if you're creating a new digital process or a new method of engaging with your customers, you need data to inform those types of business processes. And with that in mind, we looked at what was, at that point in time, 2011, the current state of technology and what was available as a new set of building blocks, because cloud was a new capability which could scale infinitely. You had, in fact, some of the infrastructure also being redesigned, redefined, where everything was becoming a horizontally scalable capability. You were not tied down by just a vertically scaling box of some kind. And that gave us the capability to think about an old problem that had existed for a while was only going to become a larger problem for the enterprise, and how to solve that in a highly scalable, in a faster, easier, better manner for the enterprise so that they could get more value out of their data that they run their business on. And that sort of drove our journey, at the starting point of Reltio.
Mm. Yeah, it's just so many parallels. We started Workato in 2013, similar kind of time range as you, and for us it was kind of very interesting to see why iPaaS was, when Salesforce started, the no software movement in 2000, why was iPaaS still stuck in on-premise software? Why people had to just still deal with all that infrastructure.
And we had the same thing where most of the data management was stuck on-prem, even though all their applications were living in the cloud.
Mm-hmm. And then you rightly say, with the AI agents, I think that explosion of applications that we saw with SaaS, I think it's gonna further accelerate. There's going to be more agents than their SaaS applications, and they're so much easier to even build yourself now.
Absolutely.
It's also interesting what you mentioned about the legacy. I'm talking about customers who are still on the mainframe, right? Older businesses, and they're coming to us and they're saying, now, look, logical step now would be, okay, we'll move to SAP. We'll do an ERP transformation, and then they come and very quickly say, look, I've done this 3 times in my career, and that's the one thing I really want to avoid because it was always so painful. So how can you help us actually jump that step? And every time it comes down to connecting to the legacy and integrations and workflows, and of course data. And how can you, how can maybe using some of these AI agents kind of jump that inconvenient step of the ERP transformation? But I think what Reltio does, what Workato does, it doesn't feel like this is going away. Tell me a little bit. So Reltio, one thing that I see on the website and so on is you have an API first approach, which I think is a little different from the other MDM. So, there's a big talk about data as a product and so on. What led you to that API first approach at Reltio?
So, Marcus, a couple of differences that were core and fundamental to us looking at this data unification problem. First was every MDM capability that started before Reltio was looking at the problem that they were solving from an antiquated lens, where first of all they're using relational databases as the way to bring information together from different sources. And the first challenge was that if you're taking in data from multiple sources, first party, third party data sources, every application has its own schema, has its own cardinality in that schema. But somehow, the solution that sits in the middle, that was the previous generation master data management, would also have its own schema that everybody has to conform to. That to me didn't make sense, because if you're getting a system that contributes different, let's say, number of email addresses or number of residential addresses for a customer's profile versus another system is saying it can only have one, then you already are at loggerheads in some way. And the system in the middle has to have a semantic understanding, a canonical understanding of these differences, and be able to absorb both in order to create what would be considered the best version out of this. So fundamentally approaching the problem in a different way, where instead of looking at a relational way of representing the information, we looked at the entity graph type of a construct as a better way of flexibly representing the intersection of all these different schemas and contributions from these schemas. The second fundamental thing that we looked at was how would people consume this information? And every company has a lot of different ways in which they want to consume the same information, because at the end of the day, when you look at a business, having 5 different representations or 500 different representations of Marcus as a customer is not really useful, versus having one single representation that can be the interoperable representation from a data standpoint that can be leveraged across whether you have a real-time process or an analytical process or agentic process. You want the same data to be consumed with the same level of fidelity associated with it. And yes, if somebody's coming in from compliance standpoint, then they want the total representation, versus if somebody's coming in from a marketing standpoint, they only want to see certain attributions, certain type of details or contributions from certain sources. That is, a viable thing. But if we did it through an API, then we would be able to represent it in every experience in an equal manner and make it interoperable and integratable at a faster rate and pace. So that was the thinking. That's why we went with the API first approach. And then any experience that we had to create or guide the customers to create, we could use API as the starting point, as the lowest order type of operating capability that they could use across their entire enterprise.
Mhm. So it seems like, okay, so you have this kind of magic in the way you have the knowledge graph in Reltio that gives you, on the data quality side, just a structural advantage, and then you make it, I guess, more accessible for other systems through
easier to consume. And that's where API, whether it is retrieving a profile, searching for a profile, or seeing the latest and greatest view of the profile at any given point in time, we brought the API to life as the easiest and the simplest way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. And it seems to me, for that new world of AI agents, or maybe hundreds and thousands of them, more than the SaaS applications before, it's going to be critical.
Absolutely critical. Absolutely critical, because just think about any business that you have engaged with. I have never heard a business owner say they want to move slower. Everybody wants to move faster. Mm-hmm. Every business process, if they were able to do something in 30 days, they want to now do it in 7 days. If they were able to do it in 7 days, they want to do it in 7 minutes. If they were able to do, the same thing in 7 minutes, they want to go down to seconds or milliseconds. And that's the natural progression that we will continue to see, where every business process needs to execute in a shorter time frame, faster, without human intervention. And this is where agentic comes in. And in a similar way, if you think about inserting AI in the middle of a business process, if you've been able to, let's assume for a second, do something in 100 milliseconds or less, just by inserting AI in the middle of that business process, nobody is going to say that now instead of 100, 1,000 milliseconds is okay. In fact, the insertion of AI, the whole purpose of AI being inserted in the middle is to make it faster. So, when you think about that, the data that informs those decisions has to be available as the always on, always accessible, fastest moving piece of the entire puzzle, so that you can get to that leverage, you can get to that business outcome in a shorter time frame. Simple examples would be, think about call center automation. A call comes in, the time to first call resolution. Some of the customers that we work with, such as Liberty Mutual, they were able to, before bringing Reltio in, they were able to do it in 3 to 5 seconds, which is not too much time. But when you apply a very high volume call center scenario and think about taking that down from 3 to 5 seconds to 300 milliseconds or less with the right set of information, where no person has to go into multiple applications to look up the information about the customer, all the policies associated with the customer, and be routed to the right agent in 300 milliseconds or less, that's a huge value gain for a high volume call center type of a scenario. And that's just one example of automation that can be powered with the right data to be able to make the right decisions.
Yeah, you're already getting a little bit into my next question. So I'm just thinking about, we got IT executives here on the call who are listening in, and I'm thinking about, what's the best way to explain to them how Reltio and Workato together can transform their businesses. I think you highlighted speed already. I think that's really important. For us, it was always, what we saw was it took too long building integrations and also maybe rewiring integrations. If I think back to the COVID days, we had some customers where I think I can honestly say that we probably saved them because they were able with Workato to kind of adopt to new environments that they never imagined would ever occur, right? New supply chains. I mean, if Toast, like a restaurant business that reconfigured itself to be like this takeout business, or these kind of stories. So speed is, people always talk about cost. Maybe people talk about bottlenecks of integrations, but at the end of the day, it comes back to speed and agility. I think that maybe the other thing also that you mentioned, because obviously there's the old term of master data management, and I think you used the term data unification. I mean, we always talk about a unified Workato integration platform where whatever the integration task is, if you want to do a little message here and there quickly, or if you also want to move a lot of data at some point to load something, if you want to create a new API, all of these we feel needs to be in one unified platform. Is it those things? Is it the speed? Is it the unification that matters? Anything else that you can think of how you think we can together best transform someone's business?
A couple of things come to mind, and especially where we are today with the state of technology and the new things that are continuously evolving around us. If I look ahead and think about the future, the process orchestration as one capability, and which is where Workato plays. A lot of the reinvention is going to take place, because if you had certain business processes, can you further automate them? Can you further increase the speed of the business? With that kind of reinvention. But at the same time, below the process orchestration is the data layer itself, where your organization's ability to move fast, or your organization's ability to transform, because it's not just the digital transformation that we did in the past, also now the new AI transformation that everybody's trying to lead with or inform in their enterprise. That gives us an opportunity to think about data differently, and think about data where it can be a reusable asset that can not only inform all of the legacy applications that run today in the enterprise, because you need more value or the ability to make data as the portable asset outside those applications, so that when you think about the lifespan of those legacy applications, you're thinking about how to sunset them. Data is the continuum that needs to be separated out. And at the same time, it needs to inform all of the agentic process transformation that you're doing up on the top. That's the new landscape that you're defining. And that's where I think the collaboration or the partnership of how these two types of capabilities work hand in hand is what we are able to jointly offer to the customers, to be able to move at that rapid pace, especially to bring their enterprises into the new age of AI and the capabilities that they can benefit from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned, okay, there will probably be more AI agents than SaaS applications, and I agree with you on that one. Now, when I went to the Gartner Symposium late last year, every single AI presentation had a call out to data, because it does make sense. It almost feels to me a little bit like the Gen AI movement is almost like a reminder or an impetus in a way to look at data again. And it feels to me like there's probably quite a bit of data that is still underutilized and is not. And then maybe these AI agents will kind of get us to think about data again. And because I think AI agents will just create so much value add on top of that asset, about the data asset, that I think it forces us to dig deeper and uncover and make that data accessible. Is that the way how you think about it?
That's definitely the way to think about it. And maybe I'll say something controversial here. Mm-hmm. Applications will not exist in the manner we know of them today. For example, you will not have to go into an application to do 15 clicks to get to the particular screen where you can enter data or retrieve information from. All of this will get transformed, more moving towards a prompt-based experience, where you can simply ask a question and see the information being presented in a nice layout to you. Or you can point out that this is the precise piece of information that I want updated, and you don't have to navigate to the particular screen and some of the complex UI layout that you see from applications. The prompt itself will navigate and update the information for you. And when you think about that kind of a possibility, I think the entire construct gets rewired and changed with the type of capabilities that we are seeing come to fruition. But there's a element of data, and it's not just interoperable, it's the data that informs these different steps. And that's where I think we have to think about data differently, where we have to not only think of it as a strategic asset, core data that runs your business being available at every given point in time for any business process, any decision that needs to be made, or any analytical process that needs to be informed with it. And this bridge or divide between analytical and operational will you know, disappear because it's the same information that needs to be used in both places. In a similar manner, think of it as a concept of data intelligence, data in motion, data intelligence that needs to be equally available across your enterprise so that you can drive this kind of change, you can drive this kind of agility, you can drive this kind of transformation across your enterprise. And that's really what we will see happen in the enterprise when these types of things start coming to fruition. In fact, a lot of our joint customers are already moving in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like in this new world, I mean, if you break down a SaaS application, the value it provides, so it has some. I mean, it has obviously the user interface. Now in the new world, it's going to be a lot more prompt based, right? So it's different. I think applications have sort of a pre-built workflow in them, a pre-built process flow. I mean, again, some of this will be dynamic in the AI agents, and some of it will probably be captured in a Workato. And then on the data side,
and how many of those workflows even today span more than one application or span multiple business functions, right? This whole orientation that we had from the past was a specific business function owns a specific application. We are already starting to see how those boundaries need to be crossed.
Yeah.
That's why, the future of applications is going to be very different. It'll be more process oriented. It'll be more spanning these lines of business or business functions. And you were going towards the data, which obviously has a critical role to play because it should not be the data trapped inside an application. It should not be the data trapped inside a business function. It should be the data that can be leveraged across these areas.
No, I totally agree. I think it's equivalent, right? I think SaaS applications had a process trapped inside them, where sometimes it's actually much more beneficial for the customer to think about the process going across application, end-to-end process. And very similar for the data, right? The data was trapped inside one application where it's probably much more beneficial to look at it, like you have it in Reltio with an API interface to make use of it wherever you need it. No, that makes total sense. Any other ways? I'm just thinking about Gen AI, because obviously one of the things is, okay, so how do applications evolve to these AI agents? But then Gen AI is also changing how stuff is developed, right? How you write applications even. We have a mechanism where now instead of like drag and dropping integration flows, you can just describe them in English and then the agent kind of builds it out. Anything else on your side from a data perspective? I imagine data quality, I think, can be enhanced with Gen AI tools, right?
Assembly of information is the first place, where we see that benefit. And think about when you talk about a holistic view of a customer, let's just take that as an example. In that holistic view, it's not just the attribution that you gather from all the different systems, but it could also be attribution that comes from unstructured content.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There are lots of information in any given enterprise today that is in unstructured content.
Yeah.
But being able to cull that information at scale, and especially using some of the large language model type of capabilities, we are able to pull that information into that holistic view of a customer type of paradigm. So that is the first area. The second area where we are leveraging that is think of the disambiguation. And I'm sure when you have been on the phone with somebody where you're buying products from or going to the website, you sometimes see your name being spelled differently. And being able to disambiguate behind the scenes and say that this is the same person, regardless of where they come from. The same thing happens with product data, with B2B type of information at the organization level. That semantic understanding of the data and bridging that gap now is being opened up for further variations or further computations that can be done at scale with some of the AI type of capabilities. And that's, how we are enriching some of our own capabilities or features that we roll out. And then the constant curation of information, because data quality, it's not just enough to say, and this is something that you know I don't think is embraced by the term itself. It's the tools today measure the quality of data, but they don't fix it.
Mhm.
The remediation of that data also has to happen in parallel. And that remediation can be done by agentic capabilities. And especially now, doing some of the research that a human would do before, go out, research, certain detail, bring that back, validate certain pieces of information. All of those things can be automated through agentic capabilities. And that's how we are looking at the continuum, the entire life cycle of data, all the way from sourcing to consumption, so that we can address all the life cycle gaps in the middle and enhance the quality or the trust in the data, and then make it available for consumption across the enterprise.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. Look, I'm kind of thinking like of you, the old world and the new world. What we're seeing at Workato, right, with these AI agent and so on. I mean, someone who in the past did integration and workflow, they were thinking systems, they were thinking maybe APIs and processes. They were less thinking data and so on. It wasn't now if you build an AI agent today, having the right knowledge and having the data in the right shape and being understandable also by the AI, by these LLMs is really important. So it almost feels like to me that some of like knowing about data and is becoming a more important skill of the people that do Workato. Maybe it
Absolutely.
goes the other way around also, that you're the people who really use Reltio, given that the APIs are available. Maybe you have to think more about processes also down the way. I don't know how you think about it. I'm thinking about in the ideal world, in the modern world, because both of our platforms kind of were starting a modernization in a way of our categories. What would be, if you think about a center of excellence in an enterprise one day that kind of fuses what we offer together and lets people build the best new AI agents and evolve their system landscape and so on. What would that look like? What is I'm curious, have you have any thoughts? What would the skill sets of the people look like? What would the center of excellence organizationally, but also from a tech stack perspective, like what would be ideal for these for new modern enterprises?
That's a great question. I think from a tech stack perspective, having a capability for the new process orchestration is key, and the new capabilities for the data rationalization or unification are key. Because that way you can now start creating not only the better view of information, but how to leverage that for the acceleration of your business. What are the new business processes that you're going to roll out? What are the automations that you're going to bring to life? That has to be the rapidly iterative style of development that people have to think about. And just thinking about, it's not just an agentic capability. Even the generative AI type of capabilities require access to this information, because think about the process flow, when you have to create a personalized message for engaging with your customers, as an example. In fact, even inside our own business, how we create some of that content, new content, we are using generative capabilities, but the data that is being unified by Reltio on our own customer base, partners, all of the people that we engage with, is provided as the constantly curated, enriched information that is up to date in a markdown format so that it can be used as the latest and greatest information to inform some of the content personalization that will be created out of it. And that content personalization, by the way, becomes a part of the new business process that we are outlining inside our own organization. And that's the type of evolution that is happening right as we speak across the entire landscape.
Yeah, it almost seems to me like this virtuous cycle, if you want, which is kind of like the data kind of enables new processes. And then when you execute one of these processes, maybe you leverage some unstructured data somewhere as part of your process, but then you extract data, you put it back into your data asset, and it can power new processes. It's almost like this thinking from data to process to enriching data again and making it better and better along the way, which I do think then requires, though, that the people who deal with Reltio and the people who deal with Workato kind of work pretty closely together,
hand in hand,
yeah,
with each other.
Yeah,
and that's the way in which you'll be able to unlock more benefits for the customers who are also starting to think about this kind of a transformation and journey that they need to be on.
Yeah. Listen, Manish, that was actually really exciting, and I think we got a good message here to the listeners. I think you got to work hand in hand with your data strategy and your process and integration strategy. And I do think you think of if you pick a modern tool in each category that feels like it has the same DNA, I think probably will make that easier. And then the sky is the limit with all the new AI agents and LLMs and so on to unlock all the benefits from data, from the data assets, and what's possible with new processes and smart processes. So I wanted to say thank you. This was really good, and I'm really looking forward to doing more with you guys. I mean, I've met a couple of joint customers and joint prospects recently, and it's always been actually very exciting. So it's great. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for having me on the show. And I'm really excited about not only what we can do together, but also, the power of process and data together informing the next set of decisions and transformations for our customers.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Please make sure to rate today's episode, leave us a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the show so you will never miss an episode. I'll see you next time.